Can you imagine a world where a single explosion shatters the very foundation of a nation's strength? On October 7, that world became a reality for Russia. In an astonishing act of defiance, Ukrainian partisans targeted St. Petersburg, the heart of Vladimir Putin's power. Imagine the screech of metal tearing through silence as a 15-car military freight train derailed, sending shockwaves through the Kremlin. This was no ordinary railway disruption, it was a carefully orchestrated surgical attack that struck deep within the fortress of Russian military might. As panic swept through the Kremlin, the implications of this audacious sabotage became clear. It wasn't merely a train derailing, it exposed a vulnerability hidden within the vast network of Russia's railway system. This operation occurred on a key line connecting St. Petersburg to Pskov, a critical military staging area on NATO's doorstep. The Ukrainian partisans knew what they were doing. They aimed not just to disrupt supplies for the front lines, but to challenge Putin's narrative that Russia would remain untouchable, secure within its borders. When the explosion rattled the ground, it raised urgent questions: who orchestrated such a daring move? The answer was already known: Ukrainian operatives had claimed responsibility. But the real intrigue lay in the choice of location. St. Petersburg isn't just any city, it's where Putin built his empire, surrounded by loyal allies. By targeting this region, they planted seeds of doubt not only about military security but about Putin's grip on power itself. The targeted railway line serves as a vital artery for transporting military equipment and economic resources between the major city and the rest of Russia. With one strike, the partisans didn't just sever a supply line, they unleashed chaos, halting not only military movements but also civil traffic. This disruption alone could lead to widespread economic turmoil, leaving both soldiers and civilians stranded. But that was just the beginning. The effects of this sabotage rippled out like a stone thrown into a pond, leading to a cascade of challenges for the already stretched Russian military. The railway system, once a symbol of strength, became a liability requiring vast security resources to protect. The Kremlin found itself in a precarious position, needing more personnel to guard dwindling security while simultaneously pulling troops away from the front line, risking further vulnerability. As fear seeped into the minds of both soldiers and civilians, the once mighty Russian defense narrative began to crack. Every soldier on that railway line could sense it, a palpable unease that the next explosion might be targeting them. This attack was more than a challenge, it was a rallying cry for other partisans within Russia, igniting hopes of resistance where none had seemed possible before. Perhaps most remarkably, this audacious act exposed the true fragility of Putin's security apparatus. For more than 2 decades, the Russian government touted its intelligence network as infallible, capable of quashing dissent before it even sparked. Yet, as the dust settled from the explosion, it became unmistakably clear that the FSB and other forces had been spread too thin, prioritizing political oppression over genuine national security. But how did such a striking blow go unnoticed? The ongoing war in Ukraine had stretched Russia's defenses to the breaking point. Thousands of operatives were consumed with suppressing resistance outside the nation, while the true threat lay unmonitored within. As they fought battles in distant lands, they neglected the very railways that kept their country connected. This disaster showcased more than just a failure in logistics, it revealed a staggering disconnect between the Kremlin's proclaimed strength and the hidden vulnerabilities beneath its surface. As the aftermath unfolds, one thing remains certain: the echoes of that derailing train will resonate far beyond the tracks, compounding challenges for the mighty Kremlin and its ambitious leader. The question now looms: what will be the next unexpected twist in this unfolding saga? In a bold strike against Vladimir Putin's political stronghold, a recent act of sabotage has turned the tides of the conflict. The very fabric of Russia's security and military infrastructure has been shaken, revealing an unexpected vulnerability. On October 7, a calculated operation unfolded in Leningrad Oblast, Putin's birthplace. This wasn't mere happenstance, it was a meticulously planned attack that struck at the heart of Russia's military logistics. The targeted railway, a crucial artery of military transport, was bombarded by a hidden explosive. As a military freight train carrying supplies to the front lines rounded a bend, the explosion erupted, sending shockwaves through the Kremlin and derailing not just the train but the very narrative of invulnerability that Putin has painstakingly cultivated. The train's derailing was no mere inconvenience, it was a critical blow to the Western Military District. Those who planned the attack were acutely aware of the railway's significance. This was not simply the dismantling of a transport corridor necessary for moving ammunition and armored vehicles, it was a strike against the entire logistical lifeline of Russia's northern forces stationed near the borders of NATO nations. With each derailed car, resistance grew stronger against the Kremlin's grip on power. Moreover, this line served not only military purposes but also functioned as a vital economic lifeline, connecting bustling St. Petersburg, home to millions, to the rest of the nation. The sabotage was dual-edged, targeting both military and civilian transportation, which could spark economic turmoil throughout the region. Imagine the chaos: halted civilian journeys, stalled freight deliveries, and a profound sense of panic emanating from the disruption of daily life. In a single act, the operation in Leningrad became symbolic of much more than a train derailing. It was the unraveling of Russia's carefully crafted security stance. Fear and uncertainty now ripple through the ranks of soldiers and civilians alike, raising questions about the Kremlin's ability to safeguard its territory. If a single explosion can wreak such havoc, what other unseen dangers lie ahead? How fragile is the facade of control that Putin's regime has built? The effects of this sabotage will resonate far beyond immediate logistical paralysis. With the Kremlin facing an insurmountable decision: defend the vast railway network or fortify the fronts, the war has reached a new and dangerous threshold. The explosions have unraveled not just metal tracks but have infiltrated the very psyche of a nation. What happens when the people begin to lose faith in their protective systems? As this crackdown continues, will it merely sow the seeds of rebellion among the populace? Answering these questions will be crucial, as the landscape of power in Russia begins to shift beneath Putin's feet. In the heart of Leningrad, a thunderous blast unleashed chaos, not just derailing a train, but shattering Russia's ironclad promise of homeland safety. Ukrainian partisans struck with deadly precision, paralyzing both military supply lines and civilian hearts through this targeted sabotage. Can you imagine the acrid stench of scorched metal hanging in the air like a shroud, the earth trembling underfoot as shockwaves rip through the dawn quiet? Did those Kremlin watchers really think their vast web of tracks could withstand such a cunning ambush? Now, this single explosion ignites a relentless chain of catastrophic failures, a brutal domino effect that exposes lurking vulnerabilities. Picture the screech of twisting rails and the rumble of collapsing carriages: 15 vital freight cars loaded with ammo and fuel, veered violently off track on the crucial St. Petersburg to Pskov line. Repairs? Clearing wreckage and probing for threats? Days stretch into weeks, choking the lifeline of Russia's western military hub. But wait, it's far more than one thwarted train. Hundreds more grind to a halt, stranded in frozen sidings or abandoned stations. Fresh tanks, artillery shells, fuel tankers, and troops destined for the front, all paralyzed, as if an unseen hand squeezes the air from their mission. A Ukrainian commander stares blankly at his maps, realizing the supplies he begged for, ammunition vital for survival, lie buried under twisted debris thousands of kilometers away, courtesy of a lone partisan's resolve. This isn't mere disruption, it's strategic suffocation. Severing the artery to the front while blocking the vein back to the heart. The explosion halts all traffic, military convoys and civilian journeys alike, leaving a void of silence where machinery once roared. Enter the second brutal wave: resource diversion, amplifying cracks in an already fragile armor. The Kremlin faces an unthinkable dilemma: guarding a railway empire spanning tens of thousands of kilometers, every stretch, bridge, and tunnel, around the clock. It demands hundreds of thousands of troops and guards. Impossible? Absolutely, yet post-sabotage, the FSB and army scramble, pulling forces from elsewhere to fortify these critical veins. Where from, you ask? That exhausted Ukrainian front, bleeding soldiers needed to hold the line, or Moscow's inner defenses, stripped to shield tracks that feed the fury. It's a vicious cycle of self-sabotage, weakening Russia in a humiliating spiral. Who will fill the gaps now, as panic grips the elite? Soldiers yanked from battle, leaving front lines exposed, or will cities like Moscow echo with vulnerability? This forced retreat is strategic ruin, diverting manpower from conquest to desperate patchwork protection. Yet, as the dust settles and trains remain idle, another storm brews, a psychological vortex far deadlier, breeding fear in the shadows. How long until those endless rail corridors, once symbols of unshakable might, become conduits of dread? Every engineer, soldier, and rider feels the chill of uncertainty. The FSB's all-seeing gaze, seemingly blind to this breach. How could such an audacious strike evade detection? The Ukraine conflict drained them dry, scattering focus amid internal squabbles. Agents once honed for real threats now chase social media whispers, while their best counter-terror units clash in occupied streets far from home. But here's the twist, a flood of disinformation and dissent drowns their systems in noise, rendering real danger invisible. The homeland's shield, repurposed as a weapon abroad, leaves Russia exposed, vulnerable to the unexpected. Is this the end of Putin's fortress illusion, where war's chaos seeps through every crack? As alarms blare in the night, with distant explosions echoing like thunder, troops wonder if the next tremor will collapse their world. The dominoes teeter. What's next in this unraveling empire? Imagine the shockwaves rippling through the Kremlin as chaos erupts within its very heart. The undying promise of safety, proclaimed for over 2 decades, hangs in the balance as a calculated act of sabotage rattles Russia's military command. This isn't merely a train derailment, it's a bold declaration of defiance, a heart-stopping moment when a band of Ukrainian partisans deal a massive blow to Vladimir Putin's regime. The morning of October 7 visited upon St. Petersburg, Russia's cherished cultural gem. The clang of metal against metal heralded the demise of a military freight train. A mighty convoy of 15 cars, laden with vital ammunition and fuel for the war in Ukraine, jolted violently off the tracks, spiraling into destruction. As the dust settled, questions erupted: who orchestrated this daring act and why did they choose to strike here, in the shadow of Putin's power? This choice was no accident. St. Petersburg is not just a city, it's the birthplace of Putin's political empire. Striking this nerve center of military logistics was more than tactical, it was a direct affront to the very essence of his authority. The railway line, a lifeline for transporting military resources from factories to the front lines, suddenly became a symbol of vulnerability. This one explosive act shattered the Kremlin's illusion of invulnerability, compelling even the loyalists to wonder, what next? The chaos didn't merely stall military shipments, it created a chain reaction that threatened to paralyze Russian force structure. For every soldier who sat waiting for ammunition that would never arrive, panic spread, leaving the front lines exposed. It was as if a pulse, the very rhythm sustaining Russia's military might, had been abruptly severed. But what follows this act is profound, an unraveling of the Kremlin's grip on power. With every train halted and every soldier left without supplies, the ghosts of doubt seep into the ranks. Trust erodes as every citizen begins to question the unshakable security that had been promised. It's here, in this web of fear, that the real danger looms, a psychological collapse that leaves behind uncertainty and dread. This sabotage, this singular act of defiance, sends tremors throughout the nation. Other potential partisans, long dormant, awaken, emboldened by the notion that change is within their reach. They too could be agents of disruption. Meanwhile, the reality sets in: the mighty FSB, once the omnipotent guard against threats, has dropped the ball. Instead of embracing its role as protector, it has become preoccupied with suppressing dissent within its own borders, leaving a gaping hole in the defenses against true adversaries. This begs the question: how did such a tightly woven security network miss the signs of real impending chaos? The ongoing war in Ukraine has stretched resources thin, scattering intelligence officers across occupied territories while leaving their homeland alarmingly exposed. The FSB, once a proud bulwark against treason, finds itself unable to discern genuine threats amidst the deluge of misinformation and internal strife. In conclusion, we stand witness to a pivotal shift. The ironclad armor of security that had cocooned Putin's regime is now cracked. The very doctrine that ensured a serene facade is imploding, revealing the stark reality of a regime vulnerable to both external attack and internal dissent. The invincibility promised to the Russian populace now seems a hollow shell, stripped bare by an audacious act that may redefine the course of their national narrative. In a world where secrets linger in the shadows, the story reveals how an audacious sabotage shattered the illusion of invincibility. The myth of an all-seeing intelligence apparatus had crumbled, exposing the vulnerabilities that lay hidden beneath the surface. A shocking diary of events unfolded, culminating in a strategic attack that slipped past the watchful eyes of an agency once revered as untouchable. On that fateful day, a railway line that once echoed with the rhythm of military might became the stage for chaos. A meticulous plan orchestrated by Ukrainian partisans exploded into reality, derailing a massive military freight train in St. Petersburg, Vladimir Putin's political heartland. Imagine the screeching metal as the train crumbled under the fury of an explosive device, sending panic rippling through the Kremlin. It was not just another military setback, it was a devastating blow to the very foundation of state security. But how did this astounding attack evade the grasp of the FSB? The answer lies in the ongoing war in Ukraine, one that stretched the agency's resources thin, compelling it to fight on multiple fronts. Over the years, the FSB had diverted its gaze from genuine threats, instead focusing on silencing dissenters and monitoring social media. Agents once trained to catch masterminds behind genuine sabotage now found themselves chasing shadows of political opposition. This shift had a profound consequence. Inevitably, the FSB became blinded to the real saboteurs. Moreover, the pride of the FSB, its most skilled operatives, were diverted elsewhere. Thousands had been sent to occupied territories in Ukraine, wrestling with resistance movements. Their attention, once a vigilant shield for Russia, was now a spear directed abroad. This redirection of focus left the homeland vulnerable, while the echoes of war consumed their capabilities. As the railway line that links modern metropolises lay disrupted, fear spread like wildfire. With each passing moment, trust faded from the hearts of the citizens. The very system designed to keep them safe had failed spectacularly. The Leningrad sabotage was more than an attack, it was a collapse of a doctrine that promised security, unraveling the narrative that the Kremlin worked so hard to maintain. I've painted a vivid picture of how one single attack could reshape an entire nation's perception of security and survival. But the aftermath doesn't end there. With increasing fear and vulnerability, one must question the stability of the regime. How will this devastating incident influence the psyche of the Russian people? The audacity of the partisans raises eyebrows and encourages whispers among the dissatisfied citizens. The time has come for a moment of reckoning, the lines have blurred. What does this mean for the future of Russia? In a shocking turn of events, a daring sabotage operation has thrust the war into the heart of Russia, striking at its very core. On October 7, in the shadow of St. Petersburg, Vladimir Putin's political bastion, a Ukrainian partisan group executed a bold railway sabotage that would leave the Kremlin reeling. Picture this, a 15-car military freight train, laden with vital ammunition and supplies for the front lines, derailed in a cacophony of clattering metal and chaos. This was no ordinary incident, it sent shockwaves through the Kremlin, igniting panic among its ranks. The sabotage played out on a crucial railway line that serves as the lifeblood of Russia's military operations. A hidden explosive, planted with precision, erupted just as the train thundered past, derailing the locomotive and creating a massive, tangled mass of wreckage. This was not just an attack on logistics, it was a strategic strike against a symbol of Russia's power, undermining Putin's vows of security that painted war as something that could only exist far from Russian shores. Why this specific route? This wasn't an accident but a calculated decision with profound implications. Leningrad Oblast, Putin's birthplace, holds not only historical significance but also operational importance. The targeted railway is a critical artery for transporting military resources and is a vital link to NATO borders. By severing this logistical lifeline, the partisans delivered a stunning blow to Russian military capabilities while simultaneously sowing chaos among civilians dependent on this route for their daily lives. As the dust settled from the explosion, questions began to swirl: who masterminded this audacious attack? The Ukrainian partisans wasted no time in claiming responsibility, but the implications ran deeper. This was a challenge not just against military forces but a direct affront to Putin's authority and control. The fallout was immediate and widespread. The railway network, previously viewed as a backbone of security, became a conduit of fear and vulnerability. Soldiers, civilians, and engineers alike faced an unsettling realization: safety was an illusion. As confusion reigned, the Kremlin's response became mired in chaos, fueling paranoia and distrust within its ranks. What happens next when the very forces meant to shield the homeland are now deployed to secure it? With military resources stretched thin, the regime was forced into a desperate gamble. Critical officers were redirected from the front lines, further exposing their already beleaguered troops. This vicious cycle of necessity and risk meant Russia was not only threatened by external forces but weakening from within. With anxiety festering, the psychological toll of the sabotage began to manifest. That once invincible railway network morphed into a harbinger of insecurity. The fear of impending bombings crept into the minds of everyone using those tracks. The regime's failure to protect its infrastructure became a shared worry, gnawing at the trust between the state and its citizens. In the aftermath, the Kremlin found itself at a crossroads. The unthinkable had happened. Putin's narrative of unmatched control was shattered. The explosion in Leningrad represented more than a logistical failure, it was a breach that threatened the very soul of the regime. In his pursuit of competent blame, Putin's hunt for scapegoats risks triggering a panic-induced witch hunt within the security apparatus. Three groups emerged as prime targets in this reckoning. Local FSB leaders, who failed to anticipate such a seismic blow to national security, watched uneasily. In an atmosphere thick with fear, the urgency to deflect accountability grew, risking a spiral that could further destabilize the already precarious regime. As the dust settles and the echoes of that fateful explosion resonate in the halls of power, the question remains, can Putin's government restore the facade of invulnerability, or has the war finally breached the sanctum of Russian sovereignty? The shadow of conflict has stretched into the heart of Russia, igniting fear and uncertainty in a place once deemed unassailable. Imagine this, a serene morning in St. Petersburg, the city known for its grand architecture and rich history. On October 7, a thunderous roar shattered the tranquility as a military freight train, laden with ammunition and fuel bound for the front lines in Ukraine, derailed spectacularly due to a sabotage meticulously orchestrated by Ukrainian partisans. This wasn't just an attack, it was a statement that struck at the core of Vladimir Putin's power. As the cars crumpled together, an echo of panic reverberated through the Kremlin. The train's derailment unfolded on a critical railway line, the very lifeline linking St. Petersburg to Pskov, a hub for Russia's military operations near NATO borders. This strategic sabotage ripped apart the fragile illusion that the war was a distant concern, confined to Ukrainian soil. The question that hung in the air: who dared to challenge Putin's regime right in his political backyard? Interestingly, this location was chosen not frivolously but as a calculated strike against Putin's legacy, the birthplace of his political empire. The symbolic weight of targeting this region was profound, striking fear into the hearts of both his loyalists and civilian residents alike. The attack unleashed not only a logistical nightmare but sent shockwaves through military and civilian operations alike, halting vital transportation routes and sending Moscow scrambling to respond. But the consequences ran deeper. The successful operation exposed the cracks in Russia's impenetrable facade, revealing vulnerabilities that echoed throughout the nation. Soldiers, engineers, and ordinary civilians now traveled along those tracks with a shiver of trepidation, acutely aware of the new reality: their safety was no longer guaranteed. Imagine the heavy air thick with dread as every blast echoed the failure of Putin's promise, decades of assurance that war would never come home. The failure of the Federal Security Service, FSB, revealed how misplaced priorities could lead to disastrous oversights. Rather than rooting out genuine threats, they had become obsessed with silencing dissent within the country. The absence of vigilance allowed for an audacious act that would resonate across the land. But while the Kremlin fumbled to address this crisis, a scramble for blame began. The quick-fix targets? Local FSB directors in Leningrad and Pskov. Surrounded by whispers of potential health issues and unforeseen corruption scandals, they became scapegoats. This tactic aimed to placate the public while obscuring the deeper faults in the system. And yet, there lurked an even darker intrigue in the political corridors. As whispers grew louder, rival factions within the FSB and the military intelligence sector saw this chaos as a prime opportunity to wrest control. Would these internal struggles shift the power dynamics, leading to further instability within the regime? Thus, what appeared to be a single act of sabotage spiraled into a multifaceted crisis, igniting fears of betrayal, exposing systemic faults, and breeding an insatiable power struggle. The looming question now reverberates: as the regime grapples with its failures, will it rise again or crumble under the weight of its own contradictions? In the ominous shadow of Russia's pivotal city, a seismic event unfolded, shaking the very foundations of Putin's regime. October 7 marked a daring act of sabotage orchestrated by Ukrainian partisans, targeting a military freight train destined for the Ukrainian front. As the morning dawned, a massive convoy of 15 cars derailed, sending shockwaves through the Kremlin and igniting an atmosphere of panic. Imagine the sound of metal screeching, the chaos of crumpling steel, and the piercing realization that the war had indeed breached Russian soil. This wasn't merely a train derailment but a bold declaration that Russia's intricate railway system, once perceived as an impenetrable backbone of its military strength, had become a glaring vulnerability. The operation not only incapacitated a critical supply line but also undermined Putin's long-standing claim that war would remain outside Russian borders. As reports of the derailment swept through the halls of power, questions arose: who was behind this audacious act, and why here? The answer soon surfaced. The chosen location, a strategic artery for military logistics, held great significance. Leningrad Oblast, Putin's political birthplace, became the backdrop for a direct challenge to his authority. The attack resonated not just in military terms, it was a calculated strike at the narrative of safety that underpinned his rule for decades. What might happen next as this chaos unfolds? The repercussions extended beyond military ramifications, creating a ripple effect that threatened to paralyze not just the armed forces but the daily lives of ordinary Russians. The main railway line that connected the bustling metropolis of St. Petersburg to the rest of Russia now lay in shambles. Thousands of civilian and military trains were stranded, their fates intertwined in the aftermath of one explosive moment, leaving the military dependent on a precarious logistical chain in turmoil. This act of sabotage created confusion and fear among soldiers, civilians, and bureaucrats alike, each bracing for the next unpredictable disruption as the safety of their homeland hung in the balance. How could a government, so heavily armed with surveillance and intelligence, allow such an incident to embarrassingly unfold on its soil? In a hushed gathering, senior officials grapple with the fallout. As blame shifts among factions within the military and intelligence sectors, the atmosphere grows tense, becoming a dangerous game of survival. The internal strife within the FSB intensifies, igniting fear of purges and infighting, as no one wishes to bear the brunt of responsibility for such a failure. They scramble to project successes, falling prey to a cycle of deceit that blinds them to their own vulnerabilities. In this climate, paranoia breeds distrust. Every corner creates shadows of suspicion. Junior officers, often less experienced and competent, rise in dominance, replacing those who once held the knowledge and skill crucial to the state's survival. As adept agents become casualties of political maneuvering, the heart of Russia's intelligence apparatus weakens, leading to greater insecurity and poorer decision-making. As rivalries simmer amidst the high-stakes game of espionage, how might the internal conflicts lead to further destabilization? What unforeseen consequences loom as the fabric of a once unshakable regime begins to unravel? This calculated attack serves as not only a military blow but a visionary strike against the very essence of Putin's promise: safety within the homeland. The stage is set for escalating tensions and unforeseen alliances that could reshape Russia's future. In the grip of unforgiving purges that crushed the spirit of the nation's elite guardians, vital experts abandoned the fray as institutional wisdom crumbled and creativity died. Russian troops and shadowy agencies devolved into shadowy bureaucracies teeming with obedient fools, stripped of true cunning. The deepest dread emerged in the icy stagnation of command chains, where hesitation doomed bold moves. No commanding officer or paper-pushing official dares shoulder the weight of grim tidings or ventures fraught with peril's risk. Whispers of setbacks vanish, buried under veils of fabricated triumphs. Whispers of setbacks vanish. Fabricated triumphs. Vital intelligence, filtered through layers of deceit, cloaks brutal truths in rosy illusions to please the throne. This veil of delusion could propel the supreme ruler into a fog-shrouded abyss, spawning even graver blunders down the path. The very apparatus that fumbled the Leningrad strike teeters on the edge, ripe for future blows. Hold your breath. Can a single spark of defiance ignite the collapse of a nation's iron will? Picture Putin's once impenetrable shield, the fearsome FSB, now corroded from within by its own ruthless claws. This audacious assault morphs the Kremlin into a ravenous beast, devouring itself with each frantic paw swipe to seal the wound. Putin, who wielded the agency as his unbreakable bastion, now glimpses the creeping rust and hears the ominous creak of impending fracture. And this internal rot, this whispering doom, lurks far deadlier than any battlefield rout abroad. As the empire crumbles in the siege of its own making. Imagine the chilling realization: one catastrophic domino, triggered by partisans' fire, topples the grand facade of invincibility. The war, once confined to distant horizons, has crossed into the heartland with seismic fury.